Thank you. Could I possibly have that?
You can.
Fantastic.
It's off right now.
Okay. All right, so once upon a time happened before I joined One Fine Stay, so we sort of skipped each other and didn't really meet. And by the way, my colleague Mark over there, he's the one that makes the magic happen. So all the props to him. I'm originally a hardware engineer, then went on to more software, and now doing product management. And today I'll be talking about One Fine Stay and what we do as a business and how mobile helps. So I hope that's all right. So in terms of One Fine Stay itself, we take fantastic homes, we then prepare them so that people can come and stay while the host is away, and then we make sure that everything is set up in a way that would be equivalent to a 5-star hotel. As we give you a warm welcome, we give you a phone, and make sure we're there along the way when you need us. So we have a tiny little video just to give you a sense of what we do. All right. I hope that wasn't too long. Right, so we've got thousands of homes. As you could see in the video, there was an app for the guest. That is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got thousands of homes, which means thousands of rooms, and they're all different. So I'm just going to quit this. So we have thousands of different rules. This is the example of one particular home. Each home is divided into floors. Each floor is divided into the rooms. Each room has its own content, and then for each type of different content, we then have an equivalent of if this, then that tells the people in the field what to do in a dynamic checklist. So that way we make sure we don't miss anything out and everything is prepared as it should in terms of making sure we achieve the level of standards that we always aim for. So if something as simple as the blue toothbrush is on the left, the red one is on the right, we need to make sure that when the host comes back is exactly the same way. So that's a lot of complexity. This involves taking hundreds of pictures. It goes from 250 to 350 per activity, and this can be in the space of an hour or an hour and a half. And then the people in the field have the same tree structure that you saw before. We call it ontology or the blueprint, appearing on the phone. So if you have particular Okay, that's all right. So if they have particular indications as to how to prepare the plants, how to water the plants, and so on, they will be able to go into there and see it. Yeah? Okay? All right, I'll take this line. Perfect. So just to give you a little bit of, just to give you a bit of context, just in 2015, we uploaded 5.5 million pictures. This might sound like not a lot if you compare it to a company like Instagram, but when you take things into consideration, for example, in 16 days of Christmas, we have 650,000 pictures, and this came from about 50 to 150 phones in the field. So each phone, the actual client application, is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It's very, very different to an application whereby a user uploads 1 or 2 pictures a week. This is very, very heavy-duty networking. So just a big overview about what we do. We have the home search, and then the different things you can find about the home, as well as the ontology view, which I mentioned before. We then have information about each. Key custody is a very important one. We have thousands of homes. We have 4 to 6 sets of keys. Each set of keys has a specific QR code that needs to be passed on from one person to another. So if a driver gives the keys to a team leader, that scanning needs to happen, and so on, and so on, and so on, all the way to the guest, and then back to the safe. So everything is anonymized, and we keep track of where everything is because this is very important. And finally, in order to review the pictures that were taken by a completely different team 2 months ago when they prepared the house, we then allow people to then see the stream of each application, each activity in the field, and be able to see where everything was and how it needs to be put back correctly. In terms of the guest, as you can imagine, over the last few years, people have started using their phones a lot more over the holidays, so we cater for that. We give them the phone with free calls and local data. That's quite important. Some people might want to keep using their phone, but when it comes to calling the restaurant to make a reservation, they prefer to use ours. They also use ours to discover everything through the app. They might also have the app on their phone. And if they have a particular set of phone numbers they want to call and so on. They can keep using both because ours can work as a hotspot as well. So we're there to provide solutions. The phone is one type of solution, but the guests can use it in as many ways as they want. And then again, recommendations for what to do around. And this is the overview. We give them recommendations. We then allow them to do things like call an Uber straight away from the app. But most importantly, and this is the part where the complexity comes into play, every single home has a different heating system. We need to be able to allow the guests to then go into the app, see how to use it, and make sure they can feel like they're in control rather than feeling like they're in somebody else's home, which is a factor that we want to make sure we lower the barrier of. We don't want people to feel in a foreign place. They need to be able to just quickly go through, see the home instructions, and use it as if it was their own. All right, so these are the tools that we use. We have a particular Ruby script looking at GitHub whenever there's a change, there's a pull request, it'll run the test, and all this is done with SQL Server, and then this passes back onto GitHub, puts the green tick, code review can be done, and then we have a whole bunch of notifications both into HipChat and into Jira from Fabric and Fastlane. We do MDM. This is because the staff app is only delivered to the phones that we own and we give to the members of staff. And then in terms of all the media and all the creation of thumbnails, we do that on the fly immediately after they're uploaded with NSLondon, and everything then ends up in S3. And if you want to then download it when you're redoing the activity in reverse, you will be effectively downloading the thumbnails that were done with Lambda, and then if you tap on the app, then you can download if you tap on the thumbnail, you can download the full picture. So in terms of minimal viable product, we have a lot of users that rely on us, and these are the team leaders. The team leaders then obviously report on to general managers in each city. We have 5 different cities and we're growing. So we want to make sure that the experience is as painless as possible. So in terms of them requesting a particular feature, we need to make sure that we deliver something along the way. So we can't just keep them waiting all the way until it's finished. And we try to deliver things in very small chunks. And in terms of design for the real world, we have a lot of edge cases. People go and take hundreds of pictures in a basement, and then the Wi-Fi is very weak, and then the network's not particularly good, and they keep switching from one room to the other. So these sort of things we need to take into account, make sure we consider. And then as well, a lot of the effort goes into fixing those, which they obviously expect to just work out of the box. And the final thing that you normally get a little bit of grief about is, oh, well, it's a little slow, or the battery runs out, or things like that, which means that a lot of the effort that we do might not be recognized as much as it should by the user. But we still got to do it. And just a very brief quiz. What's wrong with this picture? When I speak to electronic engineers, normally they will point out the soldering iron is back to front. But when speaking to you guys, what's wrong with this? Nobody reads the instructions. Actually, there's no instructions with apps, very rarely. You might see a few screenshots that fly through once, but we cannot assume that we can ship that out with it. So finally, in terms of look and feel, make sure you keep things simple, both beautiful for the user, but something that's not going to look dated a few months down the line. We don't want to do gimmicky things. We want to make sure it looks good. And with regards to the actual users in the field, we want to make sure that it's something they recognize. So we're not going to throw random UI and UX to it because they are going to be using it day to day, and we need to make sure that it's reliable, fast, and easy to use. In terms of design, you're going to ask yourself how far you want to go. Our approach is normally to start on the left-hand side and grow it until you don't need to go any further anymore. Obviously, I'm not going to insult anybody here, but if you know it until the end, that's props to you. So choose your level wisely. In terms of bottlenecks, a lot of people talk about scale. I tend to try to narrow that down to bottlenecks because scale most of the time means immediately gets linked to, oh, more users, more load, more servers or whatever. When in reality, a lot of the time, you need to think of bottlenecks in terms of how your code needs to be refactored to be able to create additional features in a very easy way. So from that point of view, other things can happen too. So if you're coming out of a basement and your network's not particularly good and you only get GPRS, welcome back to 1996. And if you can remember, that's the Fugees and the Spice Girls and Bill Clinton in Atlanta. You don't want to be working in that space, but sometimes your phone will. So you've got to account for that. Working with MDMs, you normally expect something. You won't really get that all the time. There's a lot of variability. You'll have phones that all of a sudden are supposed to be in London, and the MDN will tell you, oh, it's in Sheffield somehow. And you know the phone is in your pocket. And also the same thing with regards to delivering updates. Some phones get the update, no problem. Some other phones don't for some other reason, and you've got to work with that. So you've got to account for these sort of things when shipping. So with regards to MDM, make sure you choose wisely before your company goes into that. In terms of QA, you've got your fantastic app ready to go, but you're actually giving that to people that rely on you. Whenever there's something wrong with our staff app, we hear about it immediately. So make sure you do as much testing as you can. And some parts of the solution, obviously, you've got the software in your own development environment. That's all controlled and color-coded. But when you're actually going to ship into the real world, you don't want it to go sideways. So I suggest you plan, you prepare all your bits, and then get your releases in a row. Once you get there, hopefully, you'll get to information for them to benefit from it. So that's one of our mottos. In terms of simplicity, do that for your users, but also for yourself. So in terms of maintenance of the code, is very important. And the cat recognizes that on the bottom left, that's a ball, but right, that's also a ball. So if you can do that with few, then so be it. So thank you very much. So just a quick mention. You can imagine, we do a lot of media upload to S3, and we've actually done quite a bit of work to take the S3 library that Amazon supplies, and so, which is a very, very cool part of the work we do.
This one? Yes. So are there any questions for Eduardo? Hey, right here.
So that's been in the cards, except that there's bigger fish to fry, unfortunately. But it's in the works. So we've got that, and then we've got the delivery CI setup, which is quite similar to what the second speaker is going to talk about. And we needed a few extra bits and bobs that particularly didn't supply when we started. But yes, we do strongly believe in open sourcing what we can. However, sometimes what we don't have is time because we've got to do other stuff. But yes.
Is it Swift or OTC?
So we work with both. We've got obviously code that was there before, and we now work in also with code that's coming up. Thank you.